Raul, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. First, I just want to congratulate you on your book success. It's been a hit. I have it right here. So I'm glad to see that so many people are loving your story as much as I did. So congratulations.
Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, of course. So I just want to start with one question. I'm sure that you yourself are aware of how interesting and inspiring your story is, but what made you want to put it all into words and write this book?
Thanks for the question, Joe. So a few things led to that. First thing was on my second tour, while I was on active duty in the military, I was invited to speak to at-risk youth in a program that the city had. And I remember standing in front of those youth and just all of their eyes were zoomed in. And they were all heading in the wrong direction. But as they heard me get in front of them and talk and how they could relate to me and knowing that I was there in their shoes once before, and then to hear the oh wow and hey I want to change and turn my life around. That was the first start. And then my Navy family heard about my story at that time, and a lot of them, and there's too many to name, were like, hey, you need to write a story. You need to write your life story and where you're at today, and you can change lives. And that's what sparked it all.
Awesome. When did you start writing? What year was this that you first spoke to the at-risk youth and got the inspiration?
Yeah, so when I first talked to the at-risk youth, that had to been 2004.
Okay. So it's been in your head for a while and it takes a long time to, create the final product. So it had to be like when you see it, it had to be so fulfilling to like have it in your hand. Like it has to be such a special feeling.
It was amazing. I'll never forget the day that my first batch of books came in that box. I couldn't believe it. I was blown away for sure.
Now that we're talking about the book, I wanted to get into some specific parts. Early on, you discuss your childhood and how you grew up in such poverty, and a lot of those parts really stuck out to me. But there was one moment where I remember you talking about what it was like going to school in clothes that didn't fit and dealing with bullying. And, when you look back at your life to where you are now and you look back at those early difficult days in childhood, how do you feel like when you look back on those days as a kid, now as an adult?
Yeah. So initially, I think like, wow, I remember the feeling of just being looked at by other kids like, oh, this is the poor kid, or ha, laughing at me. Look at his shoes. Look at those high water pants.
Hmm.
Just I remember that feeling, and I remember the anger that built within me at such a young age. And I remember even being sent home because I had Vaseline in my hair. All the kids had gel in their hair, all this cool gel in their style their
Yeah.
hair, and we couldn't afford the gel, so I put Vaseline in my hair one day, and it was scorching hot that day, and it was dripping down my face, and the teacher literally sent me home for that. But I remember feeling very angry, very embarrassed.
Yeah.
And then I didn't want to go to school. But now that I look back at it, I wish that I had someone back then that looked me in the eye and told me, hey, you know what? Be grateful for what you have.
Mm.
Because there's a lot more people in this world, more kids in this world that are way worse off than you are.
Yeah.
And I wish someone would have told me that. Just be grateful. And now that I look at it, is that, you know what? I wish I am grateful for everything I have. And I also instill that in my kids and everyone that I mentor, is just be grateful for what you have, because there's so many that are so unfortunate and don't have the necessities that they need to live, a normal life.
Yeah. And I think as a kid, it's so hard to put things into perspective. Like, your mindset is just so narrow at times when you're young. And also like kids are tough, man. Like kids could be brutal. The
Yeah,
kids aren't easy.
yeah, they're not nice for sure. Yeah, and at that age, you just want to be cool. You want to be part of the cool crowd.
Yeah. Speaking of that, like being a part of the cool crowd and fitting in, I believe it was in chapter 4, you mentioned that you felt like when you were young, gang life could give you what you felt like you were missing. So could you kind of dive into that and share what you meant by how you felt?
Yes, Joe. I felt the void when my father left. So my father left when I was 5 years old, and I talk about that in the book on how that all went down. But I felt the void. I felt um, distance from my mother and my sister. So I felt like I didn't have a family. I felt like I didn't have friends. I didn't feel protected. I didn't feel like I had anything in life. And I found out right outside my door as I started seeing the gang members in the local city. And they brought me in with open arms. And then I started to feel safe. I started to feel that family, that brotherhood that I was missing. And yeah, it felt good. And that's all I knew.
I feel like sense of community is the one thing that all people look for the most, right? Like that's nobody wants to be alone. I mean, like isolation is probably the hardest thing to deal with, and community is so important. And when just like putting it in perspective, when you have none and you're vulnerable, I could, that's what I think stands out the most about your book is you make it clear like there is nothing to aspire for with gang life. Like there's nothing like lofty about it, but what happened was a product of where I was from and how I was raised and my circumstances. And I think you really do such a good job of putting it all in perspective. And I, it's so interesting thinking about how you just needed that community and that was, what brought you in. And it's a good thing that, it's so inspiring, like to see where you are today after that. It's just it's an incredible story. I read your book like twice already, so I
Oh,
it's a
that's
great thing to say
cool.
about them.
I appreciate that, Joe. Thank you. Thank you. And you hit the nail on the head with everything you just said. I appreciate that, Joe. Thank you.
Looking at your book, you mentioned that at one part, only the strong survive, but even sometimes the strong die. But you're here today. So can you talk a little bit about how you made it out and if you consider yourself one of the lucky ones?
I definitely consider myself one of the lucky ones. There's only a few of us, especially out of South Central Los Angeles and the immediate neighborhood I was from and running the streets. And um, one of the things I feel got me through that was faith in a higher power, faith in God, something that my mother always is instilled in me as a young boy. I'll never forget. That's one thing that I really listened to her. Everything else came in one ear or went in one ear, came out the other. But that always stuck with me is have faith. Pray to God when you find yourself in trouble or in a worry or in a jam. Pray to God. Have faith. And I always did that. I always did that, to myself. And I had conversations with God, and I feel like God watched over me throughout my times in the streets because there was many times where I found myself in a jam or being shot at or being chased or many dark moments that I could have easily not been here.
And one thing I noticed is there was a certain point where something clicked and like your life changed and you realize like, hey, I have to make a dramatic change. And I know you discussed having kids and how that was so influential for your life. So just going to the moment where everything did click and you decided to make a change. Do you look back at that moment at all? Could you share what that moment was and what was going through your head at that time of your life?
Yes, Joe, I often think of that. I actually look out. I stand on my balcony many times and just look over. I have a great view. Thank goodness I'm blessed to have a great view. And I think about those days for sure. The first thing that sparked in my mind to change was my daughter. So my daughter was born in 1996, and I was still an active gang member at the time. But my daughter was born she was a preemie baby, so she was born 3 months early. She weighed in at 2 pounds and 6 ounces.
Oh my
She
God,
could literally
really?
fit in my she can fit in my hand when I was born. So she was a miracle baby. She wasn't supposed to make it, but by the grace of God, she pulled through. She's a fighter. She's my little fighter. I tell her that a lot, and she made it through. And of course, thanks to the doctors and the hospital staff that made that happen. But at that time, I was like, man, what am I doing? I need to do something for this little girl, my daughter. I need to do something for her. I need to provide for her in the right way, in a positive way. I need to give her what I didn't have. I need to be there for her as much as I can. And living life in the streets is not, it's not going to do it for her. At some point, if I continue this path, I'm going to either die or go to jail for the rest of my life. So that was the initial spark. And then one day I was hanging out in the hood, on the block, on the street in South Central LA. And I was looking around like, wow, there's a lot of my friends and homeboys from the gang, from the neighborhood that were going to jail, that were dying. Some were paralyzed. Some were getting strung out on drugs. And I was like, you know what? I'm blessed to be alive and make it this far, to be where I'm at today. And I've got to change. I've got to change. So at that time is when I had to want to change.
Yeah. And then what drew you to the military to, take that step?
Yeah, so I remember seeing a commercial on TV, and there was a commercial of a soldier, of actually a Marine. He looked pretty cool, nice, cool uniform. He had a gun, and I was like, wow, that looks interesting. That looks pretty cool. Like, and I remember I just went to the recruiting station. I didn't talk to anyone about it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anything about the military at the time. And then I just walked on over to the recruiting station.
Do you still remember like the initial people you ran into there?
Oh, yes, I sure do. I remember the initial response from the Marine recruiter when he first saw me, because I was still in my gang attire, and, he saw the gang tattoos. And he was respectful, but he was kind of like, it's not going to happen. And then when they sent me over to the Navy recruiter, I'll never forget the gentleman who sat down with me. The Navy recruiter sat down with me and had listened to my story and gave me the opportunity.
It's interesting. I remember reading that in your book, how he was like, go down the hall, check it out there. So what is it? Is it the Navy is typically a little bit less strict with certain policies regarding like tattoos, or what was it that made him direct you to the Navy office?
And so at that time, so my understanding at that time in 1998, when I first joined the Marines, were having a lot of issues with gang members joining the Marines, gaining the training, and then they would go out into the streets and use that training in a negative way. So they were having a lot of issues with that. So their policy then was a lot more strict with who they were recruiting, especially gang members. And the Navy at the time, they weren't as strict, thank goodness. Yeah. And of course, I got a waiver, which means I needed permission from higher authority to join.
I know, and I love how in your book you have like the picture of the waiver. You're like, this thing did it all.
Yes. Yes, I always look back at that.
All right, it's like these little things that, it's like one little piece of paper that, without it, your life could have been so different. I think it's fascinating. So what were some of the more challenging things when you first joined the military? When you were your first couple months, first couple even years in the Navy, what were some of the most challenging parts about that?
When I first joined, the transition was definitely to the transitions from hardcore gang member out of South Central Los Angeles to a military mindset. So getting out of that, the boy in the hood mindset was one of the toughest challenges. But at the same time, Joe, I'm here to tell you that I also joined with an advantage, because those negative things that they instilled in us in the streets, and those things that I learned in the streets, such as leadership, because we had leadership in the streets, in the hood. We had structure in the hood. We had chain of command in the hood. We had discipline in the hood. All those things, I transferred those into a positive into the military, which helped me succeed in my first few years of the Navy.
What were some important lessons that you did learn through the Navy that I know you mentioned some things applied from your previous life to your new life, but were there any lessons in the Navy that you had never learned before that made a big difference for you?
You know what? I wouldn't say there's any lessons that I've learned, but I would say that I did live by three simple little rules that help me succeed, and that was pushed onto me by a mentor. But I live by three simple little rules, and it was be on time, never be late, right? Because that shows that the Navy could count on you to get the job done, right? Listen to your military orders and execute. So do what you're told, right? And show up in the right uniform, which means show up in a crispy, good looking uniform, ready to go at any time. And I live by those three simple little rules and help me succeed. That was like half the battle in the Navy.
Yeah, and you've obviously succeeded. I mean, you've had such a successful military career, and one of my favorite parts of your book is when everything comes full circle, and you discuss that feeling of when you get access to the Chief's Mess, and you mentioned that feeling of purpose and family and responsibility and brother and sisterhood that you'd always been seeking. So this is a bit of a two-part question, but can you just describe to those who haven't read your book or don't have much Navy understanding, can you describe what the Chief's Mess is, and then also describe how you felt at this moment of your career?
Yes, Joe. So the Chiefs Mess consists of Navy Chiefs, and the ranks are enlisted ranks E7 through E9. So it consists of Chiefs, Senior Chiefs, and Master Chiefs, and the Chiefs Mess is known as the backbone of the Navy. So we are enlisted sailors who started from the ground, E1, and made it to the level of E7, and we are full of tradition. We're proud. We're recognized by our anchors that we wear on our uniforms, and it's just one of the best things that happened to me when I was accepted into the Chiefs Mess. So the Chiefs Mess has so much to offer, and makes so much impact on our Navy. It's amazing. The networking within the Navy. I mean, we have the answers to everything in the Navy, but not just in the Navy, but in life in general. If there's a question that a brother or a sister has within the Chiefs Mess and they don't have the answer to the question, if you pose that question to the Chiefs Mess, that question will be answered. You best believe it. We're known to make things happen. But it was a very, very proud moment when I made Chief for the first time in 2008, and it was a feeling that I can't describe. But I was super proud, and I'm super proud to this day. And then making it to the top enlisted rank Master Chief, I was definitely on cloud nine, and I was so blessed and so grateful to be able to have a positive impact at that high level of the enlisted ranks in the Chiefs Mess.
That's awesome. So it has to be so fulfilling, right? Like, you've worked so long and you achieved this. I felt it too, and I wasn't even in my life, so I love that. And I wanted to, before we move on to something else, I want to just go back to another topic that you bring up in your book, and that is mentorship. I have always believed that mentorship is so important for everyone of every walk of life, every profession. I know firsthand how important it is to get a strong and influential mentor in your life. So, could you just talk a little bit about how mentors have made a difference in your life?
Oh, yeah. So I'm with you too. I believe that everyone in life should have a mentor. You know, success doesn't come easy. And sometimes we need that push and that help and that motivation to succeed. And thank goodness I had a great mentor, and I still have mentors to this day in my life, which I'm so grateful for. But one thing that helped me succeed in the Navy is that first mentor that I had. He was a Navy chief at the time. He's now a retired Master Chief, and I talk about it in my book, but I'll never forget him. But it's so important to have a mentor because, you know, that mentor could guide you in your life, both professionally and personally. And we all need that, I believe, and definitely help you succeed in life. But I was so grateful to have that first mentor right away. He took me under his wing. I wanted to be like him. I wanted to emulate everything he stood for. You know, he was very well respected. He took care of his people. He took care of the mission. He was never about himself. It was about everyone else. And I really looked up to that, and that stuck in my mind forever. And I wanted to pay that forward and become a mentor myself.
Do you know if he got a copy of your book? I wonder if he's read it.
Oh yeah, he's read it. He's
He's
got a
read it.
copy of my book. Yeah, he actually it's cool. He sent me a text message a couple weeks ago and was like, "Hey, can you send me a screenshot of this picture?" And it's a picture that I have of him in the book. And yeah, it's good to hear from him.
That's awesome. And it's so good to see that you've become a mentor yourself. And there are definitely, even if they've never met you in person with your book, just thousands of kids out there who feel that way about you. And it has to be such a great accomplishment because it's something that'll last for other kids' lives and lives beyond them. So it's really great work that you've done, and it's your life's really come full circle.
Thanks. So I appreciate that. It's a great feeling when I get that phone call and from that junior sailor or even senior sailor, like, hey, thanks for the guidance, thanks for the help or whatnot. So it's definitely a good feeling.
Was there anything that was difficult about writing the book? Like, if you look back, was there anything that you could say was the hardest part about writing it?
You know what, Joe? I would say that the dark moments in my book, because I kept it real in my book, and there's some dark moments in there, and writing about those dark moments, I actually feel like I relived those moments.
Yeah.
But I also feel like it was a form of therapy as well because it helped me kind of get it off my chest. So that was difficult, and with that, I won't forget this. I was actually when my book was first released, and it was my sister and I, my nephew and my son, and my son and my nephew wanted me to read the book out loud. They wanted to hear it, only certain chapters, and I would remember reading it, and I think it was chapter 3, and it was hard to get through it. It was hard to
Yeah.
get through it. I had to even take a pause, and I'm not afraid to say that,
Yeah.
I'm not. And then I handed it over to my sister, and she took over.
Yeah.
But definitely, yeah, those dark moments in writing those was definitely difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. But it's important that you did share those because I think sharing those dark moments is what makes the book real, right? Because you're not trying to
Yes,
hide anything, and that's what I think makes it so important.
yes, exactly, 100, Joe.
Do sometimes people who are watching this could be interested in writing something themselves. So is there anything you'd like to share with others trying to tell their own story, something that you learned throughout the process?
Yes, Joe. I would say is like just get to writing, just
Yeah.
start. Like don't worry about the grammar, don't worry about mistakes, don't worry about how pretty it looks. Just right away,
Hmm.
just start writing, and write till you can't write anymore.
Yeah.
And then you can go back, and if your memory's fogged or whatnot, you can go back to friends or whoever to help you out, and just get to writing, and don't be afraid to get it out there. Of course there's a lot more that comes after that, but that's the initial step, is get up and get going, start writing.
How's been the early reaction to your book? I know your book was released in 2022, but what have you been hearing so far from readers?
And you know what? I'm so blessed to hear the reactions that I've been hearing. Um, I've heard a lot of reactions. One that I get a lot, and I love this. It's like, hey, it's hard to put the book down.
Yeah,
It's
right.
hard to put it down. They get to reading, it's hard to put it down. Some other reactions are like, oh my gosh, I cried in this chapter or in this chapter, or hey, I can totally relate to all the things you're talking about, or hey, you can change lives with this book. Go out there and talk to the youth and parents and all these things, and all those reactions. I'm blown away, and I love it. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to get my message out there in hopes that I could inspire and motivate and possibly change lives.
Yeah, I definitely think you did that. It's been great to see the reaction to your book and see the success. So it's mission accomplished. And I want to know, do you have any other projects you're working on? If not, is there anything you'd like to share with people who are readers, followers of yours?
Joe, I'm not working on any other projects, but the editor of my book, her name is Jolene Horton. She served with me, great friend of mine now. She's a Navy veteran. Her and I talked about doing another book down the line. working together. We have a couple ideas, but since I just retired this year and I'm trying to figure life out and all these things going on, I think we're going to kind of take this year off and next year hit the ground running.
Yeah.
But I can't. I wanted to say that BookBaby. Oh my gosh, BookBaby definitely made this dream happen. I'll never forget when I jumped into that blog and just started reading about self-publishing companies and self-publishing and all the great things they had to say about BookBaby. And that's what attracted me to BookBaby. And I'm so glad that I went with BookBaby because they made my dream come true. And they made it so easy for me. You all made it so easy for me. I greatly appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. I love what y'all say is you make writers into authors, because I'm like, me, an author? I'm not no damn author. But I mean, there's a book authored by me, which is great, but you all made that happen and it's amazing. So I would tell everyone, hit up BookBaby. I'll make it happen. I'll never forget when I got that first book and just the quality of the book, the cover, the writing, everything was amazing. And it's been amazing from day one. So thank you, Joe. Thank you to BookBaby, your staff. You guys are doing great work. I appreciate you. And I highly recommend y'all to everyone and anyone that wants to get a book published.
I really appreciate it. That's what we love to hear. Like just seeing projects come to full circle, and you are an author, like whether you know it or not, like you can put it on your resume as like the first, you can put it on this as a second thing underneath Master Chief, but it's true, and your book is changing lives. So thank you for your kind words and for doing this project, because I think your book is so meaningful. It's going to continue to make an impact as time goes on and more people read it. So I recommend it to everybody, every walk of life. You could just learn a lot about yourself from reading Raul's story. And to end, I want to ask one question, and it's, if there is one thing you wish you could tell your past self, what would it be?
If there is one thing I could tell my past self, I would just tell my past self that there would be several things, but just there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah,
light at the end of the tunnel. That's what I would tell myself.
And there definitely is. I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for your book's success. And again, you could buy Raul's book on Bookshop, Amazon, anywhere you can buy books. It's Essay to Master Jefe. So give it a read. Where can you could also follow Raul on Instagram. You're on a bunch of different social platforms. Do you want to, I'll have them written out in the formal interview, but do you want to just drop those? You could plug those.
Oh, yes, Joe. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter.
We'll give him a follow, stay up with his work, his life, and give his book a read. So Raul, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your story to everyone.
Thank you again, Joe. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and thank you to BookBaby. Much love.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Take care.
You as well. Goodbye.